Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Summer Power Chats. Summer is that time when educators finally get some breathing room. And while many of us as educators, because I consider myself an educator, even though I'm not in a building technically all the time, many of us step away from the building. We are still in the mode of reflection. We are thinking about our previous year, and actually, we are preparing for what's next. That is the heart of this Summer Power Chat series. I'm your host. I'm Dr. Tangi Reed Marshall. I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, and principal consultant of Liaison Educational Partners. And I bring nearly 3 decades of educational interaction, experience, and knowledge to share with incredible authors. And today, I'm excited to bring to the stage author, professor, profound thinker, Dr. Jeremiah S. Sims, and I want to show you his work that we're going to be talking about today. He's going to be talking to us today about finding the beautiful path on Blackness, multidimensionality, and radical becoming. So let's get started for our conversation with Dr. Sims.
Hey. Hi.
All right, Dr. Sims, welcome to our Summer Power Chats. Before we get started, let us know about you and the crux of your book, and then we will get started with our questions.
All right. So my name is Jeremiah Sims. I'm from East Bay area, Richmond, California.
Okay. Who did you write this book for?
So it's interesting. I feel like, there was a level of catharsis. And this book is, so we talked about this a little bit before this. Like, this is the fourth book that I've authored. And so this particular book is more a memoir than anything else. Right now that I believe my life is so noteworthy that it necessitates a memoir, but it was just a way to deal with everything that was going on, because I was diving deeply, not for the first time, but it had been many years into like being reflective and being present and trying to figure out and wrestle with my own trauma. So my own trauma was not the focal point of the work that I was doing. I was trying to help other people in a consultancy capacity deal with some institutional trauma at college, because I was doing educational consulting at the time. And I took some courses on listening and connection. I took some courses on trauma-informed healing. And so it got me, and I'm just in conversation. The book was a form of catharsis for me. I was doing a lot of commuting at that time. And the between the two places I was going, you couldn't fly. You had to drive, right? Because it's two small airports, and it would have just been a nightmare. This is 3.5 hours, 3 hours, 45 minutes each way. And I'm going maybe sometimes twice a week. So I have and then, I have electric cars, so then I have time where I have to charge too, right? So I have there was no shortage of time. And so actually the majority of this book was voice to text that I went back.
Wow, that's interesting technology use, right? Then you have to transcribe it, of course, yeah.
It's almost harder though, because voice to text isn't that good, right? So you have to go back and fix so much. But anyway, so I had so much material to go through, because I'm just, and this commute is like behind the mountains in California, right? So there's no connection. So I couldn't do much of anything else. Satellite radio wasn't working. So all I could do, right, was just speak to my phone and hope that it was mirroring the things that I was saying. And so there are parts of this book that reads like stream of consciousness. Well, that's why. Anyway, so the book is, I'll start with the title. So it's Finding the Beautiful Path. And so that comes from, I read this book some years ago, incredible book. I highly recommend it. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass from Professor Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a Potawatomi botany professor in Minnesota. And so in this book, she was looking at indigenous science and juxtaposing it with Western science. And she says Western science fetishizes the mind.
Yep.
And then there's how can we inculcate, how can we impress in the mind? And then there's a lesser focus on the body. She said, but indigenous science, on the other hand, it looks at the mind, the body, the soul, and the spirit. And then she offers this beautiful line that I've been ruminating on for years now. And I think I get it. And every time I think I get it, I realize I don't. But she says, when you focus on those 4 components, you become whole. And then she offers the line, it is the whole person who finds the beautiful path. Right. And so part of my book is Finding the Beautiful Path, because it is a homage to that book, and also a recognition, that is aspirational, that I am trying to become whole. right? Because when I become whole, I can find a beautiful path. And then the second part of the subtitle is on Blackness. And I realized that my story, my mom, who's on the fringes of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense here in the Bay Area, she took classes with Dr. Huey P. Newton, right? There's a picture somewhere that I can't find it, not digitized. It's in somebody's photo book somewhere where I was in class with a pleather jacket on with Dr. Huey P. Newton, right? So my political positionality was informed in large part by the way I was raised and where I was raised. And so I realized that the way that I navigate this world and the way that I'm viewed in this world is inseparable from Blackness, right? Those things go hand in hand. Because you know how it is. Like I go to certain places and then the service is not up to par. I have to wonder, it's because I'm Black. Right?
I do the same thing.
Right?
Yeah, you watch. Yeah, I'm very attuned to that. Right. I even in the simple ways in which somebody, a waiter, will have my husband and me at a table, and then another group from a different persuasion at a different table. They will greet us and be pleasant, but there's a level of specificity that they will offer to another table. They will talk more about the specials sometimes. They will engage in a different level of conversation. So I definitely track what you're saying.
Right. And my graduate advisor, so I did all my education, BA, MA, PhD at UC Berkeley. And my graduate advisor, Professor Jabari Mahiri, he wrote a book in 2017 called Deconstructing Race. And he said it's not just racial insofar as these kind of rigidified categories. He said, but it's phenotypical. He actually said it's pigmentocratic, right? And so I grew up, my mother is Black. My father was Portuguese. My mother's Black and Choctaw. My brother, he's my brother, right? We have different fathers. His father is Black, right? And was more melanated clearly than my father, who was Portuguese. And so the way that we were treated was very different, right? And so I got to see this colorism, right? What we call colorism early on. And so my brother, who's the kindest, gentlest person, would be treated with a level of apprehension that should have been reserved for me because I was a raving lunatic at that time. Right? But I was given a level of presumed innocence. Now I wouldn't have that vis-a-vis a person who's racialized as white, but in our family dynamic, I would. And so it's interesting. My wife is Chinese and Danish and British, right? And so our kids are all mixed up phenotypically. So I have a son who's darker than me. I have two sons who are darker than me. I have two sons who have dirty blonde hair and blue eyes, right? And so the conversations that I have with them are also very different, right? And I have two sons that are somewhere in the middle, right? Everybody has their own little brother, so phenotypically at least. And so it's interesting because I tell my blue-eyed boys, right, like you're going to be privy to different conversations that your brothers are, even though you have the same parents, right? So then there's a level of responsibility that you have, right, as an ally, as an advocate, even though there's a one-drop rule in this country, you're still Black, right? But the reality is the way that you're perceived is very different. And so in this book, there are six chapters. There's 33 chapters total, but 6 of these are letters to myself, right? So
wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. So there's 6. So there are 33 chapters, 6 of which are to your sons to kind of prepare them for the world in which they are operating. How would you take that idea and help a leader in a building? So you wrote this for one category, but how would you take this book that you've written with the dynamism of finding the beautiful path and all of the language that we hear in education around the whole child, right? What is one thing as you think about your book and you place it in an educational setting, what would be one thing you'd want a building leader to walk away from reading your book with?
Oh, great question. And so just to give some more context, my wife and I, we have a school here.
Oh, wow.
So she's the head of school. We have 75. We'll probably have 80 students this upcoming fall. So I was formerly a guide. It's called Acton Academy Reading, and I was formerly a guide. And I was working with middle schoolers. No surprise there, right? Because I taught middle school for a long time, and it was tough, right? Because in this capacity, you don't teach. There's no lecturing. I was a college lecturer. I'm a dean now, but I was a lecturer for a long time, right? And so with that, with respect to Acton Academy, right? My job was to launch Socratic conversations. And if the learners had an issue that they were kind of butting up against, I couldn't provide any answers for them. All I could do is ask questions. Now, it's a good thing that my undergraduate degree is in rhetoric, right? So I understand
So
Socratic
you can
dialogue.
do that, right?
But actually, I felt like I knew too much, right? So it was the toughest educational experience I had. That said, this book was written for educators anyway. And so so I'll go back to the subtitle real quick. So multidimensionality. So the idea that we are flattened human beings. And so here, Reading is changing, right? It's changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's changing. It's formerly a sundown town, right? But
Oh, wow.
it was also a stop. It was also a stop on the Underground Railroad too, right? So this has this interesting kind of conflictual history. And so, I'm seeing this kind of demographic and political shift, right? But it's probably still MAGA country, right? Probably is, but it's not as overt as it was even 5 years ago when we first moved here. Don't tell me, y'all ask me why we moved. That's a whole God story. We had to have that conversation often.
We'll do Let's Talk Power Live, and you can take us into that conversation next time.
So real quick on this idea, right? So I would see people, and I'm a Second Amendment person, right? So I don't want any problems, but I'm from Richmond, California. People don't want problems with me either, and so we'll just keep it like that, right? And so because I had a chapter in this book is called "I Stay Strapped Like Car Seats," and I'm not talking about seatbelts, right? And so I meet different people. I met a bunch of different people who would not know that the crux of my work is critical race theory, right? We haven't had those conversations, and so but we're able to be in community because we have this. We share, kind of constitutive parts of an identity kit, and so. So here's a seminal story. Let me stop rambling. So my oldest son, Judah, right? Who you look at that young man, you're like, oh, he's black, right? You don't see that with all of my kids. You look at Judah, he was coming back. He was on the swim team. He was coming back from practice. And this was like the catalyst for this book. He was coming back from practice and I was talking to him and he wouldn't turn around and look at me. Teenagers do weird things. I did weird things when I was a teenager, but it was like, extreme. Like he was completely turned and I was looking at the back of his head and I'm like, Judah, look at me. I want to talk to you. And he turned around and he had a black eye. So I grew up without a father in the home. And then the father who was in the home for a while was abusive, alcoholic. And so I always felt unprotected. And I'll tell you what wasn't going to happen was that my kids were going to feel unprotected.
Exactly right. That was not going to be your child's situation. Right.
I turned my truck around and I'm like, well, I gotta figure out how much money I have for bills. I'm about to air this whole place out because ain't nobody touching my baby. And so as I was turning the truck around, I had this kind of epistemological moment, right? And I think it's due to age. I think I was 45. I'm 50 now. I was 45 at that time. Had this happened when I was 30, I'd be in jail, right? But this happened when I was a little bit older. And I had time to reflect, and I was like, "Man, I think Judah didn't want to tell me about this, because maybe even though he's never seen that side of me, I think he might have anticipated that type of reaction, right? Because all my life I felt like if A, then B, it was a causal relationship. If this thing happens, then I'm going to react this way because that's just who I am. That's just what happens. Somebody does something to my kids, I'll kill them, and then I'll just deal with the consequences. That's what they make repentance for, right? And so I had purposed in my mind that that's just who I was based on my lived experiences. But then this question hit me as I was driving back to where I picked him up from. Well, what if I'm not like that? What if I could be different? And so that's actually the catalyst for this book. That's that idea of radical becoming. We're all becoming something. Some people are becoming, even once we die, we're still becoming compost, right? And so we're always in a space. We are, as human beings, we're not just nouns, we're also verbs, right? So we're always recursive, and we're always urgent. And so that's what catalyzes this idea of radical becoming. And so I would say for educators, we may have, and I've been an educator for almost, more than 2 decades. I always felt like I'm this type of educator. And the reason why I spoke about acting is because it showed me I wasn't. I thought I was this liberatory, kind of emancipatory educator. I didn't realize until I started doing acting how much traditional, and I would say stultifying education had been inwrought in me, right? And it was coming out with these kids. I wasn't able to be free enough to allow them to be free, even though, I'm a teacher trainer. I've been training teachers for decades, right? And I'm telling them how to be emancipatory educators. I couldn't replicate it myself.
It's really hard, we parent the way we were parented. We teach the way we were taught.
Right.
And
Right.
as a pedagogical move, even when we make space for newness, our default buttons pedagogically are going to be what we grew up under.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is also, and what I call in the work I do, is a power protecting move. Because if
Oh,
I
for sure.
let go of what I believe to be good instruction, then what does that say about me? And
Yeah.
does it expose me to a different level of scrutiny, of critique, of something that I may not be prepared to handle in the moment? And
Yeah.
so we tend to lean more into what we were taught, how we were taught, than we are into something new, despite any label of being liberatory or any of those other factors. Yeah,
Yeah. But the
absolutely.
crazy part about it is you're absolutely right. But I was doing it even though I knew it was wrong. Right. Because
Ooh,
I was just in a space where I was so frustrated with the model. And so I didn't
mm,
completely buy into the model. So acting there's 300 actings worldwide. And so it's not a franchise. You can do what you want to do. It's an affiliate network, right? So you pay a small percentage and you have access to the curriculum. The curriculum was really right leaning, right? So the curriculum, their point of reference for, you don't have to use a curriculum, but it's just, it's hard to totally recreate everything because it's K-12, right?
gotcha.
And so, their stalwart, the person, their North Star was like Jordan Peterson, who's like a smart guy for dummies, right? And so, his kind of positionality and pseudo scientific kind of pontification is just wrong. And so I couldn't get down with that. So I was wrestling with all these things. And then the kids, you understand this is different than the Bay Area, where the Bay Area is purportedly more liberal, but it's liberal it's the type of liberals who, for the most part, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King both decried as the biggest hindrances to
I was going to
progress.
say, yeah. They're the ones that they warned us about.
Yeah, exactly. But and
Mhm.
here it's more clear. But then there were all these like really wrong-headed things coming out. Well, Black people are incarcerated because they're predisposed to criminality. And I'm just like, I can't just give them the answer. I have to draw it out of them. And it was frustrating.
Right. Yeah,
I didn't
exactly.
want the day to end where they still had that
In their
erroneous
minds. Right.
notion in their mind. And so that was my wrestling. And I realized that I needed a lot more practice. And then, I was trying to work within the system. And I felt like the system didn't quite leave space for that. And so I'm saying all that to say, I did do better before I left. Because it's still my school. Right? I'm still calling it. I'm the beloved community builder. I just give everybody daps and take them out to lunch every so often now, because I don't have to be in there in the same way. But I'm saying this to say, as an educator, I had this prefixed notion, and it was actually really, really rigid about who I am and who I have to be in order to engage with these young people. And so radical becoming challenges that fixity, that ideological or dispositional fixity, and it allows you to reimagine who you can be when you're working through implicit biases, when you're working through your own trauma. It allows you to reimagine who you can be when you face a challenge that you don't have a blueprint for to navigate, right? And so I think the idea of radical becoming for me is the most salient, right? Because Blackness or womanness or queer, any number of things can be what you want to kind of understand the multidimensionality of. But this notion of radical becoming is for every educator, irrespective of whether or not you are a hyper-marginalized person, a BIPOC person, or anything else, right? You need to figure out that just because you've always done things a certain way doesn't mean that there can't be a shift if those ways are not serving the people who you are entrusted to care for.
My God, that makes total sense. So as we wrap up our time, I want you to think about a leader who might be in a public school, right? Who has structures around them, and they don't have always the freedom of mobility.
Right.
What is a strategy or an action item from your book, one big one that they can take as they consider the idea of the beautiful path for their staff or for their staff and their students? One big action step they could take.
Yeah. So it's it's this idea that you're a verb, right? And so I work with
Mm.
so many educators, right? So obviously, overwhelmingly, I work with white women because white women are most right. They're the largest population,
82%.
right? Yeah,
82%. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so in working with them, and I've talked to so many folks who are just like, I just feel like I failed. I did this thing, and it was a fear of failure that would disallow them from actually becoming more fully human and creating space for their students to become more fully human. And so I would encourage every educator, not just white women, but every educator in this space. I think if you could take anything from this book, is to understand that you're on a path. You don't have to have already arrived in order to help other people find their path. All you have to do is understand that this is a journey, right? You're on a journey, you call it a hero's journey, right? You're on a journey to create space for people to become more fully human, right? Because I mean, at this day and age, 2026, I mean, kids can learn online, right? They don't need
They
us.
can learn. Yeah, they can. Yeah, learning is the wall between knowledge holder and
Right.
knowledge getter is completely dissolved.
Yeah,
It is
right.
completely that positionality between I am the one in the front of the room and I know more than you is dissolved.
Right. Especially with these digital natives. I can't tell you how many times
It's
I
dissolved. Yeah.
to help me hook up things. Right. And so the idea that you have to be the whole, and that's a good point. That's what Ferry talked about, this banking model of education, that you have to be the sole arbiter of knowledge, right? We have to get away from that. And it goes back to this idea, Lewis Moll's idea, funds of knowledge, right? How do you create
Yep.
space for young people, the people that you serve, to be more fully human? And if you can figure that out, then you're on your way. And I'll tell you, you will not figure it out if you're not willing to understand how to position yourself to become more fully human. And so that's ultimately what this book is, right? That's what Ferry argues. Our ontological vocation is to become more fully human. And that means something different to everyone. It means self-care, right? It also means being a continuous lifelong learner. And it means putting yourself in a position to understand that just because you failed, you may have stumbled, right? That's actually where real learning takes place. If you get it right
That's
the
where it
first
takes place. Yeah. That's where it happens.
that
Mm-hmm.
would be my encouragement to every educator. Just understand that you're a verb, you're not just a noun, and you're finding your beautiful path. And there are going to be there may be some twists and some turns, but that's okay, because in finding that beautiful path, you're creating space for other people to find theirs as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sims. And on that note, we come to the end of this episode's Power Chat. Remember, you are a verb on your way from where you are to becoming something different. I'm Dr. Tangerine Marshall. I am your host. Stay tuned for another summer Power Chat coming your way. When you want to get Dr. Sims's book, here is his book, Finding the Beautiful Path on Blackness, Multidimensionality, and Radical Becoming. Have a great rest of your day.